Welcome to the Everyone's a Critic movie review podcast. I'm your co-host, Bob Zerl. With me, as always, is professional film critic Sean Patrick. Visit us at ihatecritics.net, everyone's a critic podcast.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handle is CriticsPod. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa, YouTube, and we're on this new format called Ghana. I think it's pronounced that way. It's out in India. So wherever you want to listen to the podcast, subscribe there, rate and review the shows there. We'll read any reviews we can find on the air.
Hello, our friends from India.
Yes, thank you for kind of giving the podcast a new life. I've noticed our downloads have gone through the roof thanks to this new platform, and we're really excited about it. And reach out to us on social media. We're interested in connecting across the world. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
We are also on Patreon at patreon.com/criticspod. It's the best way to help support the podcast. We also have our TeePublic page over at ihatecritics.net up in the right-hand corner. If you want to get yourself some podcast merch, go there. I don't know what it costs to ship internationally. Let's see.
I just assumed it was all made in China, so I had no idea.
Maybe it is.
You imagine somebody from another culture looking at that Willem Dafoe shirt and trying to figure out what the hell's going on?
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going to go with that. It's kind of like that Hubie Halloween last week, the June Squibb character just wearing shirts she didn't understand. I could see that going on. That next to like a Where's the Beef shirt from the 80s.
Yeah.
Let's jump right into it. Kind of breaking news, I guess, as we started to record the podcast. Jeff Bridges has announced he's been diagnosed with lymphoma. Sad, very 2020, as Sean said prior to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Former guest on the podcast, of course. We like to mention that whenever we can. But, I mean, it sucks. I'm confident he'll get through it, but it's still crappy 2020 news.
Typically, though, Jeff Bridges, did you see his Instagram post?
I didn't see it directly. I saw an article about it.
Announcing his lymphoma on Instagram, Jeff Bridges said, "New shit has come to light."
That's funny. It's like, where does a dude end and Jeff Bridges begin?
Oh. Right?
Ever since that movie, I don't know how much he was like that beforehand, but ever since then. All right.
And what better way to be remembered? I mean, that's the one. If you're going to do it, if you're going to be pigeonholed, that's the where to go.
Oh, God, yes. One of the best roles of all time. Hell, anybody in that movie, their role. It's a good one.
Well, except for one.
Fair point.
Fuck that guy.
All right. Let's see. Let's start with... I usually go Netflix first, so let's start with The Trial of the Chicago 7.
Yes, directed and written by Aaron Sorkin, based off of the true story of the Chicago 7, who were a group of left-wing activists who were protesting the Vietnam War in Chicago in 1968 at the Democratic National Convention. Typically, we don't go after our enemies on the left. We go after our friends. That's just the way we've always done it.
Yep.
And so we went, our side went to the Democratic National Convention. Granted, Hubert Humphrey was not a great choice, and he was actually going to continue the war himself, which was really having two pro-war candidates to be the candidates is one thing. But I mean, do we not realize Nixon was going to be worse at the time? I don't know. Who cares? Can't re-argue that. But they were there. They got the crap kicked out of them by police who started a riot, and then Nixon, being the vindictive human being that he was, decided that he was going to use some obscure law to try and prosecute these activists, claiming that they crossed state lines to cause these riots to happen, which is a law that was basically just the most racist law in the world, and they used it to go after these guys the way it was intended to go after civil rights activists. because that was entirely racist. But the whole thing is just utter complete nonsense. It was a farce. But surprisingly, all that you see in this movie are things that actually happened. I've actually read the trial transcript for the trial of the Chicago Seven, and it's even crazier than what they have in the movie. The judge, Julius Hoffman, who is extraordinarily well played by Frank Langella. I mean, he basically got the entire thing thrown out from the beginning. I mean, there's no way these guys were going to spend any time in jail, really based off of just how remarkably unprofessional and outside the law he was the entire time. He was basically building their case for them, whether he was trying to or not, for the appeal, because he had every intention of seeing them be convicted, and that comes through very clearly throughout this film. There's a lot of really great moments in this movie. There's a showdown between Mark Rylance as William Kunstler and Eddie Redmayne as Tom Hayden that is really an amazing scene. It's got that crisp, witty dialogue that Aaron Sorkin is so good at, as a basis in some truth based off of the character, based off of history. And yeah, that's another aspect of this that really did end up happening, going down exactly as the movie played it. Obviously, the dialogue is Aaron Sorkin's, but the situation was one that was real, about Tom Hayden wanting to testify and him not really being in a place to do that because of what took place. And Aaron Sorkin talks about Hayden being so integral, and he was the one who gave him that line about forgetting the word "our" when he was talking. That turns out to be a very pivotal moment, and that's a really great bit of detail. If I've got one problem with this movie, Bob, it's that sometimes that sort of classic Aaron Sorkin stuff, that talky, sort of jokey Aaron Sorkin stuff, does get in the way sometimes. There are times when characters are tossing in asides that it kind of, instead of being funny, it sort of stops the movie dead. And I could do without a few of those, but overall, I really did like this.
Yeah, I love this movie quite a bit. Part of me is watching it thinking, God, I wish everybody would watch this with an open mind. And I can just picture people I know that I respect and I'm friends with that are more on the right who would watch this and they would just see things wrong with it, or see that, and no matter what's accurate or what's not, and it's not like this is very accurate. I mean, they're just gonna sit and they're not gonna be able to watch it for what it is, and that bummed me out a little bit. But that has nothing to do with this movie. That was just me kind of thinking about specific people too in my life that I think really need to see a movie like this. Overall, though, I liked everybody in it. I'm assuming some of the asides that you didn't like were from like Sacha Baron Cohen's character, but I thought he was phenomenal in it.
It's more of there's a couple of side characters, or anytime somebody would throw in a joke, it always seemed a little bit forced. There's not necessarily the ones where directly, because Sacha Baron Cohen has a number of really great moments, especially when he and Eddie Redmayne are going back and forth the same way that Hoffman and Hayden really did in real life. It really captures that dynamic incredibly well. But there are times when somebody just kind of stops the scene dead just to do one of those brief asides and a bit of self-deprecating humor or whatnot. And from time to time, it just did stop the movie dead for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd probably have to watch it again to notice it. I watched it very early in the morning, and I love the pace of it. I mean, I watched it on my phone laying in bed, and I didn't get up at all. It was just kind of like from the whole 2+ hours it was. I was just fascinating. I found myself Googling about it afterwards, kind of wanting to know as much of it that's true, and which, like you said, it very much is. It's I don't know. It was a very good, very watchable movie that I think people will enjoy. Michael Keaton, his brief part in it, I liked a lot. It's so frustrating, but in like a good way. Anybody can go see it now. It's on Netflix. It's so worth it. In some ways, I mean, I think it's the best thing Sacha Baron Cohen's ever done. Eddie Redmayne too, probably.
I prefer Les Mis, but yeah, he's quite good.
Forgot about that one.
I'm alone in preferring Les Mis, though. I know a lot of people hate that movie.
Well, I mean,
But
this
Frank
isn't gonna.
Langella is the best thing
yeah.
in the movie, though. I mean, he's nailing every scene. I thought I was going to get frustrated eventually, but he's doing exactly what Judge Hoffman actually did. Those little bullshit things like stopping people to say, "Hey, I'm not related to Abby Hoffman," just so you know. Like, yeah, we know, we're aware of that.
Yeah.
This is not the moment for this. I don't know why you're doing this now.
Well, and it's so frustrating because that is very true, everything that he did. And, he's a distinguished older gentleman who's been in this profession for a long time. Why would you ever be? I mean, how many things did he fuck up before this? It's so insanely frustrating that someone can be that experienced and that, supposedly professional at their job and to act that way. I just don't understand how that happens, and it's beyond frustrating.
Mm-hmm. And especially when he ends up doing to Bobby Seale, which is not allowing him to have a lawyer, not allowing him to defend himself, and eventually going so far as to have him gagged and bound in the room, which is it's such a visceral scene. It just you feel it the moment he's wheeled into the room. Everybody, especially, I love the way that Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays it. He's so desperately uncomfortable, and his discomfort is everyone's discomfort in that moment, and that really sells what's taking place there. You feel it, he feels it, everybody feels it, and even the judge is forced to feel it in that moment, and it's really powerful.
Yeah, and it almost ends up hurting the prosecution by doing that. The whole thing is such a good movie. I highly recommend it. I mean, but at the same time, it's one of those where it's that next level down from like the great movies out there right now. Then it's this it's kind of that A Few Good Men, that watchable kind of fun little drama or whatever.
It's very Aaron Sorkin. And if you're not into that Aaron Sorkin vibe, you're not going to like this, because this is basically like a historic episode of The West Wing in many ways. Yeah.
But I mean, if you are into them, obviously you've probably seen it already. If you haven't, it's worth watching. Even if you're frustrated by politics right now, it's kind of beyond that.
I know you don't like the show anymore, but I got to recommend this week and last week's new The Dollop. They're doing Abby Hoffman, and they're doing him in a big way, really playing into all the actual incredible things that Abby Hoffman did and his very unique background, and it's really worth checking out.
Clouds on Disney Plus.
Clouds, yes. This is based off of a true story of a young musician from Minnesota who has cancer and who had cancer and was dying from that cancer. And he wrote a hit song called Clouds, and it was his way of saying goodbye to his family and friends. And this is a really emotional and well-told story. They really capture this moment in this young man's life where he's dying, and the inspiration that drives him to start singing online and singing on YouTube and getting discovered, getting signed to a record company and a record deal, and eventually putting out an actual hit song that became a big thing back in 2013, which is shocking to me because I have absolutely no memory of this. Like, this happened and it was completely absent from my radar, which is kind of weird. This is kind of what I do, this type of stuff. And I had no memory of this whatsoever when it actually happened. It's a pretty incredible story though. And it's got some saccharine moments, got some typically Disney uplift to it, but for the most part, they stick true to the story. They stay true to this character, this young man, and it is inspiring and it is moving.
Yeah, it gets compared to some of those not true stories that are made. They've all just left my head. But I mean, you'd know what they were. The ones that just try to make you cry, so they just keep making up scenarios that are impossible not to find sad. This one being true, I don't know. They do a good job, and the actors are really. I mean, I think the actors are really great in this. It's perfect for what it's trying to be, and I recognized the song, but I knew nothing about the backstory behind it, and it again made me want to go kind of look at some of those old YouTube videos and find out more about this character. And they show a lot of that in the credits as well. But it's surprisingly good, or I don't want to say surprisingly good, but it's not what I thought it was.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
No, you're right. It is surprisingly good because this type of story can lend itself to being cloying. It can lend itself to being too cute. It can be, you lean into the family friendly aspects too much, and it becomes unbelievable. You start to nominate this kid for sainthood, and thankfully they don't do that here. He's a very grounded young actor who really brings a sense of reality to this story, as opposed to the idea that we're going to turn him into some kind of living saint. And they resist that very, very well.
And they do a good job at capturing certain moments, like when his song's played on the radio and Nev Campbell running through the streets. That's so very real. I mean, you've seen it on, oh my God,
That Thing You Do.
That Thing You Do. I'm just late. I haven't recorded this late at night in a long time. Everything has left my head. That was a great scene. The scene where he's performing at the end and he loses kind of his breath and the crowd has to finish the song. I thought that was well done without being cheesy.
Yeah. Well, they laid that in earlier too, which was really nice. They layered in that was a dream of his to have his song sung, probably not under those circumstances, but that's what made it poignant.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of rock stars over the year. That's one of the coolest things for them is whenever somebody can sing your song back to you. That's kind of the dream of any artist, especially on the music level. And I just thought they did a great job of capturing it. And I was just shocked at how much I enjoyed it. And definitely think if you have Disney Plus, you should give it a shot. And ignore the movies they recommend with it, because those all suck. Shithouse.
Shithouse. Yes, this is a new comedy romance coming of age story about a young guy who's in college. He's alone for the first time, away from his family. He's very close to his mother and his sister, but he's now off on his own at college, and he meets a girl and he begins to have this relationship with her, and he thinks it's going somewhere, and then things take a turn. This is a really interesting movie, really interesting perspective. Cooper Raiff is the guy who stars in the movie and also directed the film, and he's quite a unique challenge that he's pulled off there in making that work and bringing that around. I like this movie a lot. I get a little uncomfortable with some of the things, that kind of that nice guy trope that they're playing on a little bit, but I think they resist it enough for me not to get terribly annoyed by that. And I think they're having a really interesting and real conversation about her sexual freedom and his sort of arrested development clashing in that way.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see this one. If it is available to rent right now, but when you type in Shithouse, don't actually spell shit out. You got to put like an asterisk in there, or it won't show up. I had to back my way into finding it, and by the time I was ready to rent it, it was getting too late at night, and I just needed to go. But it looks pretty fascinating. I'm not, like you said, the nice guy. This sounds like they didn't go as with that nice guy trope too far. We've mentioned kind of being sick of seeing movies from the guy's perspective for a while, and I don't know if this would fall in that one of kind of just being old, but
I think this feels a little bit different just because this character has the unique quality of being very close to his mother and his sister, and he's a very sensitive guy. He cries quite openly multiple times in the movie, and it's kind of nice to see that sort of vulnerability from a guy who is a really tall, handsome guy. It's interesting to see that perspective of a college guy who is so desperately inside himself and yet willing to be that vulnerable on screen. It was really that I kind of liked, and I liked the relationship with him and his mother and his sister that gets a really couple of really nice moments. The girl in the movie has her, she's very much herself, and She's not judged for her lifestyle. The movie doesn't have any judgment towards her. She chooses to have sex with whomever she chooses to have sex with, and she's not going to apologize for that. And that's a good quality to have and especially since movies don't tend to do that with female characters.
Yeah, that you did mention something that I saw in the trailer that I thought that kind of struck out was how handsome and good looking he is. Is believable in this movie? The kind of the dorkiness, or I don't even know if dorky is the right word, but because again, all I saw was a trailer, but he definitely seemed almost, for lack of a better word, pathetic. But being a very good looking man, and is that a downfall at all, or does he pull it off pretty good, or?
He pulls it off really well because, again, I think the relationship that he has, this kind of relationship that he has with his mother, and this kind of he really communicates his sadness very well in the movie. He's a very sad, insular sort of character, very insecure, and he gets that across in a very unique way by having this dialogue with a stuffed animal. He has a stuffed animal that he sleeps with, and he's an 19-year-old college kid. And he doesn't look that, obviously, and I'm not sure how old he really is, but right. They communicate his vulnerability very, very well.
I had a friend in college who talked to a stuffed animal that he slept with. It was really kind of creepy at times. But he's still he's having a pretty successful career in life, so
good.
Their own. Totally Under Control.
Totally Under Control. This is quite something. This is a new documentary that takes us back through the history of COVID-19 from back in November and December when this got underway in China to today, literally within the last 2 weeks. This is how close this movie has come to where we are now. They literally added in like aspects of the Woodward Trump tapes. That's how recent this was, and it's shocking. It's terrifying. It's hilarious at times. It's jaw-dropping how ridiculously stupid some of the decisions have been throughout this. And granted, we were aware of a lot of this, but there's a lot of this we weren't aware of. I wasn't entirely aware of what was going on with the PPE situation. That was much more messed up than I had imagined it would be. With basically Trump trying to privatize the transportation of PPE. He wanted private companies to handle all the PPE, and so he found a way to do that that cost everybody the opportunity to get the PPE that they needed at a reasonable price, including our own federal government, which it's just the guy, when they reveal the young man, this 22-year-old kid, Kennedy, who's in charge of the entirety of getting PPE for the federal government. And they talk about him having to bid for PPE against the states. It boggles your mind. The movie folds in on itself in a way that it's just everyone is so far up their own asses. You can't even begin to believe that it's possible.
And I don't want to distract from the fact that Trump is clearly the number one problem, but it goes way beyond Trump. The whole CDC stuff, the FDA, obviously Trump oversees that, but oh my God. They had the freaking tests. We had them.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know. The whole thing was nuts. The masks, that goes beyond. That goes back to Obama, maybe even further than that. With a guy begging us to have masks produced in the United States.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and hilarious and frustrating as hell.
Oh God.
It's just ridiculous. And and again, I'll go back to you want people to watch this, and clearly they don't understand what liberal bias means. Where the liberal bias is they just kind of glance over the fact that Obama had something to do with the mask thing. That's it. Everything else is true. Everything happened. So, maybe they could have made a bigger deal and thrown him under the bus a little more. Maybe it was even beyond that, back to Bush, and possibly even further than that. I really don't know when that started because, like I said, they kind of glance over it. But it definitely had been going on a while where this guy had been trying to encourage the government to bring N95 masks, start producing them again. But that's, I don't know. And it doesn't matter because the people that have made up their mind have made up their mind.
I mean, Trump fucked up big time throughout this and repeatedly and intentionally. He did so intentionally because he was intending to try and make this. He was looking for the ways that companies could make a buck. That was the way he was approaching it. It was about, and this is that fallacy again about, well, I want somebody who will run the government like a business, and you fail in that by not recognizing that business and government are two very different things. They run in very different ways, and they have to run in very different ways. You can't run a country like you run a company, because a company doesn't have to have, compassion. It doesn't have to plan in certain ways. It doesn't have to act the way a government has to act on the behalf of people. A company has to work on behalf of itself. And there's just two very, very different ways of dealing with things. And so when you have somebody trying to run a government like a company, you end up getting a fucked up response like we got here, where he's trying not to get us the best deal, but to get companies the best deal. And it's just so frustrating.
Well, and that's the thing, is that's not even running the country like a business. Because if you were, properly, I know what you're saying is right. But if he was doing it the way that everybody wants him to, then he would be worried about the best interest of the country and not the other companies. And that's where it's just so much that is beyond frustrating. And they didn't have to stop making this movie. I'm glad they did and got it out before the election, because the guy's unraveling at the seams right now, and he's doubling down on what he's done for this, and people are starting to fall off, and I just hope it keeps going that direction and he doesn't get reelected. I still hold out fear that he will, but you're starting to see more people turn on him. You're starting to see he's just falling apart. He literally said COVID was the best thing that ever happened to him. He's treating it like the fucking fountain of youth. It's insane. But I don't know. This one is one of the more effective documentaries. I also watched one called Unfit, which I'd learned nothing new in. It's just they repackaged it in a nice way, and it had some Republican people in it turning on him, which was nice. It was comfort food for it didn't upset me anymore. But this one really just infuriates you, and then it doesn't help when you're talking to people you're related to and they're acting like, or not, I'm not related to them, I'm in-lawed to them, talking about how COVID's a hoax and it's just for the government to get more power. And I'm like, it's international. It's not just here. And his kids are saying it, and they're getting kicked out of school, and he's quitting his job over, I don't know, it's just a lot of frustrating shit. There's a lot of people like that. I have friends who had COVID and are back out in the bars again, and it's like, come on, man, you're not leading by example right now. You had it, you said how horrible it was. Why are you back out in the bar a week after you're done? It's just beyond frustrating, and it just makes it that much longer before we can get into the theater because of people like that.
Right. I was thinking that the entire time I was watching this movie. I watched another documentary that's similar to this that it's called The Accidental President, and it's by James Fletcher and Anthony Scaramucci, the president's former advisor.
He was an Unfit as well, Scaramucci.
Yeah, he really doesn't like President Trump at all anymore. He's not afraid to say that. But this is about the 2016 election and about how it happened that Trump accidentally got elected. And he tells the story that everybody keeps saying that this is a myth. But Scaramucci was there. He was an advisor to the president. Trump was firing up the jet, ready to go to Mar-a-Lago to just go golfing and just go start his TV channel. He's going to start Trump TV in 2016, and he was sure he was going to lose, and then he won, and then he had to be president.
Yeah, it's because the unfit does a lot of what. I mean, they have a bunch of psychologists and psychologists and whatever. It's late. Just analyzing his behavior, and they're apparently way back when there's some rule or law that went out there where psychologists can't rule on a president as unfit. They got sued for being liable, and that was an accurate thing that happened way back then. But what's going on now is different than that. It's kind of like saying Biden has Alzheimer's or whatever. There's no evidence of that, but there is evidence of certain behaviors that Trump's doing, and basically he's a narcissist, and it's affecting the way he's making decisions and running the country and doing things. And it's not, that alone is not fit to be president. I mean, that you're making horrible decisions. Just the fact that the first press conference you had with your whatever that dude's name was, when the first thing you talk about is how many people showed up for your inauguration. That was literally the first thing that was addressed in his presidency. Mm-hmm. And it's those kind of things that it gives me a little bit of doubt to that idea that he thought he would lose. I still think he kind of did, but at the same time, it was just like the guy is so full of himself. Maybe he didn't care, and that must have been what it is. But now, I mean, hopefully he loses and goes to jail. That's all I can say. Because I don't know. That's what needs to happen. He's an evil person, and it's sad. I hope in India they share our politics. Oh, sorry. The Possessor.
Actually, India is where he had the largest international gathering of his entire presidency.
That is true. Was that in Totally Under Control, or was that in Unfit?
I can't remember.
I think they showed it in Unfit.
I think it was in Totally Under Control.
All right. I know it was definitely covered in one of the documentaries that I watched. Yeah, that was during COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah. And now India's got a massive outbreak, so there you go.
The super spreader. We apologize for our president. Possessor.
Possessor, yes. This is the Brandon Cronenberg, the son of David Cronenberg. And the story goes that there's this new kind of technology for assassins where you can take the personality of one person and inject it into another person. And you can then use that person as a weapon to kill somebody. Andrea Riseborough is the best of the best when it comes to the assassins that they have on hand. She repeatedly is downloaded into other people's consciences to commit murders in their guise, and then she has to kill herself in order to get out. But lately, she's had a hard time actually getting that last part of it. She's having a hard time killing herself to get out of the situation, and this is a very important aspect of it because she has to kill herself in order to, or kill this person that she's in order to escape their mind. She has to turn them off, essentially. That's been harder for her for some reason. She's not fully taking control of these other bodies anymore. And that comes out to play when she takes over the body of this man and sets about her task of killing his family so that a member of that family can inherit their giant business. Another movie where Sean Bean dies, by the way, because Sean Bean ends up getting murdered in this movie. This is a lot of really good ideas and a lot of really great body horror. There's a lot of really freaky stuff. Like at one point, Andrea Riseborough is wearing a mask of her own face. Like it's fucking weird. and it's really there's a lot of really great stuff like that. A lot of really creepy imagery, and I love the imagery, but I wish there was a little bit something deeper to this movie, because really, as much as it's about taking over other people's identities and what that might be like, it doesn't really have a perspective on identity itself. It doesn't really have it doesn't really give her any kind of perspective on her own identity and who she really is. And I was kind of waiting for the movie to take that next leap and be something a little bit more than just, this looks really cool. And in the end, I feel like this movie comes down to it just looks really cool. And that's enough for me to go, yeah, you should definitely see Possessor. But I was wanting it to be I wanted that next step, that little bit of something extra that would make it that much more exciting and deeper, have a meaning to it, symbolism, something. And I just don't think this movie quite has it.
Does David Cronenberg have that when he makes his movies? I'm trying to...
I think The Brood had a deeper thing going on when it came to the idea of motherhood, and the imagery that he uses in there definitely was saying something. And I think Eastern Promises and A History of Violence are both about the effect of violence and the rapid, widespread effect that violence can have. I think he's gone deeper in each of his great movies. But
he's also done the cool over substance too.
Right. There are aspects of Videodrome where you're like, what the fuck does that mean?
Right. But it's entertaining, and so,
it is.
Yeah, I don't. It sounds good. It's in theaters now, or at least select theaters.
Yeah, I don't understand the release of this movie, because I was told that they were going to put it out on streaming, and they just haven't.
I'm sure at some point it will be. I'm interested. It kind of sounds like our classic a little bit in some ways. A little bit different. It's not so much about identity in the classic, but it does. I mean, we can just get right to it unless you have more on Possessor.
I mean, I recommend it because it is cool looking, and it does have a lot of really strong. The violence is really strong. The performances are really in the moment. They're really awesome. But spending time on it, thinking more about it, trying to find something deeper to it, it's a little bit empty.
Is the body horror CGI or is it practical?
Practical.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd be disappointed otherwise with a Cronenberg name on it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event for the linear, legitimate, and universally recognized, undisputed classic.
Scanners
stars Stephen Lack as Cameron and Michael Ironside as Daryl Revick, and Patrick McGowan as Dr. Ruth. And the story goes that there are these beings called scanners, regular everyday people who happen to have the ability to use their mind to manipulate and take over and destroy the bodies of the people that they don't like. The movie, of course, is best known for one particular scene in which a head explodes in spectacular fashion. And it's really unfortunate to me that this is when people think of David Cronenberg, they tend to think of this first, because this movie is probably my least favorite David Cronenberg movie. I think this is the weakest of all of his movies. And that a lot of that comes down to not so much Cronenberg, but the cast. Stephen Lack is one of the most boring and bland lead actors I think I've seen in a movie in quite some time. And especially when you're dealing with a Cronenberg movie, you kind of want to have somebody there that can carry this the way like Viggo Mortensen does, or the way James Woods did. I hate James Woods, like, don't get me wrong, but he carried Videodrome well enough. This is a very weak lead actor, and this required somebody with a little bit more presence and a little bit more charisma, and he has absolutely none. And he really kind of sucks the movie dry at times. And on top of that, Michael Ironside, a guy you can usually rely on to be very energetic and excitable, and at the very least OTT, he's just kind of rolling as like a Nicolas Cage performance, but he's kind of muted as well in this, aside from having to bug out his eyes and or you concentrate really hard and roll your eyes back in your head because you're battling mentally, and it ends up looking really silly. They end up really looking very silly when they're having their little mental battles. And I think Cronenberg is kind of stuck because he can't really pivot from taking this as seriously as he does, because Stephen Lack doesn't have the ability to sell it better. He can't pivot to make it kind of embrace the comic aspect of it, or to make it even more frightening or gory or dangerous. And he just doesn't have that ability to sell that. And without that, it gets rendered silly when they're just kind of bugging their eyes out and making big faces, and the score is trying to sell more than the actors are. And it's just, like I said, I think this is the weakest of Cronenberg's films, and it's a real shame that he's associated with this specifically for that one visual, which is a granted, it's a fucking great visual. The accomplishment there, they take this plaster head, they fill it with all sorts of gore and viscera and blood, and then the guy shot it with a shotgun behind the scenes. He's laying behind the body and he shoots upward and he just explodes the head with this shotgun, and it's fucking gorgeous. It's really great. That's a great scene, and that's a spectacular piece of practical special effects. It's a shame though that is what Cronenberg is often remembered for instead of the other incredible movies that he's made.
And the fact that there's not much more of that in the movie till the end.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like the Phantasm Ball. People think that Scanners is all about heads exploding. There's only one head explosion.
Right. I'm glad you're saying what you're saying, because I was in a lot of ways bored and sometimes trying to figure out what's going on, because it's almost like it's trying to be too serious. I eventually kind of picked up on it. I would just realize it was moving so damn slow that I thought there was more going on than there was. And you're right, the actors are boring, and then when you get to that big showdown at the end, it's not funny enough to laugh at. You just feel bad at the actors for looking so stupid.
Yeah.
And there's a couple neat things that happen, but then for the most part, it's embarrassing, and it's not a horrible movie. It's just kind of boring.
And the twist is such a throwaway. It's a throwaway line early in the movie that they might be able to do what he does at the end. There's this kind of tossed off, but if you didn't catch that 5-second mention, about 15 minutes into the movie, that was a possibility, then the ending, you're just going, what the fuck?
Yeah. And I was just kind of disappointed, especially with so far how much I've loved everything that we've watched of his, and this being the biggest. It was definitely a letdown, but when you're describing Possessors, it kind of sounded like similar movies. Or hopefully that one's a little better. This doesn't seem to have any...
Yeah, Possessor's way better. It's moodier. It's the effects are even tighter actually, and there's some great ideas in Possessor that. A little bit more exploration, and that becomes a great movie as opposed to a good movie. Scanners isn't even a good movie. Scanners is a genuinely bad movie.
Yeah.
And I thought I liked Scanners. I really did. I really thought I liked Scanners going into this, and then just watching it, I was like, this sucks.
Yeah, just boring. More than anything else, boring. Hard to follow the actors, and I don't know.
Stephen Lack is lacking. Thank you.
1990, you saw Reversal of Fortune?
Yes, Reversal of Fortune is the story of millionaire Klaus von Bülow and his wife, Sunny, who fell into a multi-year coma in 1978. She fell into this coma for the first time, and then again in 1980, and she remained in that coma to 2006. Which, that doesn't blow your mind. She was in a coma for that long. They kept her just as a head in a bed. Jeremy Irons portrays Klaus von Bülow, who is accused of and actually convicted of trying to kill his wife. He hires Ron Silver, Alan Dershowitz, to be his lawyer. Dershowitz doesn't necessarily care if he's guilty or not. He's interested in the challenge and of the precedent that this particular case sets. and the mistakes. He's also fascinated by the mistakes that the prosecution made in the original case that he knows he can take apart. And he assembles a team of students and fellow lawyers to take this apart and help Klaus von Bülow essentially kind of get away with murder, maybe. It's hard to say. The movie isn't very clear, and really the story itself isn't very clear about whether or not Klaus von Bülow was really, whether he was innocent or whether he was guilty. The movie is trying to play both sides, and this is directed by Barbet Schroeder, who's a good director, but not a great director. And the vagaries of this really just get kind of irritating after a while. The one good thing is Glenn Close, who doesn't have a lot to do. She's mostly a head in a bed, but she's also doing a narration. They've kind of invented a narration for Sonny von Bülow to do, talking about her husband and what she might be thinking while she's in this coma. And she's very, spiky and funny and dry and classically sort of Glenn Close way. And that works. Jeremy Irons is very much in the Klaus von Bülow mold. He comes off like just this cold-hearted villain, no matter what he does. And you just assume that he's guilty just because of just his manner is just so guilty. But again, we don't know for sure if he was guilty or not. Dershowitz definitely muddied the water well enough to at least let the guy get away, and he does. And that's the true story.
Did you see anything else from 1990?
No.
You've seen Quigley Down Under, though.
Yes, I have seen Quigley Down Under, which is quite an entertaining movie, really, depending on the circumstances in which you watch it. I watched it under a very weird circumstance, but it was still, Tom Selleck is very charming and very charismatic, and yeah, it's not a bad movie.
Have you ever seen White Palace?
White Palace, I've watched White Palace as a teenager, quite guiltily, under sheets and darkness.
Me too. And then Night of the Living Dead, I never saw the Tom Savini version. Seems kind of unnecessary, but
why remake? I don't understand remaking great movies. I've never understood remaking great movies.
Especially when you were involved with, I don't know if he was involved with that one, but Tom Savini was involved with Dawn of the Dead for sure. So what's the point? But, and God, it feels like that was made in the 80s.
Yeah.
All right. Next week, we got Borat's subsequent movie film, Rebecca, the remake, Friendsgiving, The Witches, On the Rocks, an Apple Plus movie from A24. Bruce Springsteen's got a documentary on Apple. Hulu's got a movie called Bad Hair. And then...
we may whittle this down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just reading them all out because we'll see what we actually watch. Synchronics, another movie. But a lot of these are available. Witches is on HBO. Friendsgiving is Amazon?
Not sure where that's from.
Rebecca's Netflix. Borat you can rent. Our classic's going to be Rebecca, the Hitchcock original. And we'll obviously watch Borat 2 or Borat 1 as well. In 1990, nothing of note really stands out. Sibling Rivalry, Soul Taker, Graveyard Shift, and The Nasty Girl. But that is our show. That's what we'll be watching next week. So we'll kind of keep you posted as to what we're going to see. But definitely for sure, Rebecca, Borat, and probably Friendsgiving. Everything else will kind of figure on the rocks for sure. I'll watch The Witches, whether Sean sees it or not. I'll do a terrible job of my end of it if he doesn't. But yeah, that is our show. Patreon.com/criticspod, the best way to support the podcast. And then TeePublic at IHateCritics.net. Rate and review the show wherever you see us. Subscribe on YouTube. If you can read it, leave a review. We'll read it on the air. And I promise to be more verbal next week. Let's see what we got for Flick Chart. Ingrid Goes West, The Breakup.
Ingrid Goes West.
I never watched that one. Is that any good?
It's quite good, yeah.
I've always thought about it, but never got around to it. Ghostbusters 2, Vera Cruz.
Never heard of Vera Cruz.
1954, Gary Cooper, Burt Lancaster.
I've not seen that one.
Ghostbusters 2, Raising Arizona.
Raising Arizona.
It's an easy one. Tangled, Blade Trinity.
Tangled.
Yeah. Billy Madison, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Close Encounters, by a lot.
Yes. Moonraker, Bad Boys.
Bad Boys.
Agreed. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 2003, Lady in the Water.
I'm going to pick Lady in the Water because it's more enjoyable for me.
I'm going to pick Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know it's just a throwaway horror movie.
Blasphemy.
It was a straight ahead horror movie. Lady in the Water sucks.
Blasphemy.
I'll just pretend it's a different name. I actually won the coin flip and I feel kind of bad about it. Superman, Matchstick Men.
Matchstick Men.
Caddyshack, First Blood.
Caddyshack.
Going First Blood. You win. Kill Bill Volume 2, Metropolis.
Kill Bill. Metropolis is amazing, of course, but
yes, it is. The Wolverine, Scrooged.
Scrooged.
I agree.
Did you know Bill Murray hated that movie? I had no idea.
I'm not surprised.
Kind of made me sad when I heard that.
I don't feel like Bill Murray liked a lot of the movies we liked. We Bought a Zoo, We Were Soldiers.
We Bought a Zoo. I'm one of the few fans of that movie.
I don't dislike it. It's a terrible name, but I do like We Were Soldiers. You win again. Gone in 60 Seconds, Final Destination.
Final Destination.
Hook, Singing in the Rain.
Singing in the Rain.
Agreed. Career Opportunities, Sin City.
Sin City.
Yep. Panic Room, Godzilla, 1998.
Panic Room.
Yes. Dunkirk, Transformers, Revenge of the Fallen.
Dunkirk.
Agreed.
By a lot.
The Social Network, Fargo.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
That's very hard for me.
The Coen Brothers versus Fincher. I mean, where do you go? I'm gonna go Fincher. Social Network.
I was gonna go that way too. I thought for sure we'd be splitting. That movie is so underrated and it's rated pretty high. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you're telling me what I'm gonna watch. That's the one I'm gonna grab.
And I'm gonna grab Fargo a lot compared to a lot of movies. But I love The Social Network. The Godfather Part 2, The Incredibles.
Godfather Part 2.
Agreed. Cold Mountain, Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane.
Yep.
I like Cold Mountain, though.
The Thing, Freddy vs. Jason.
That's harder than you might think. But
Yeah.
I'll go The Thing.
Yeah, Freddy vs. Jason's a ton of fun, but The Thing really is good. And very accurate to today's. It's very 2020. That and They Live are very. Reversal of Fortune, The Rundown.
Weird. The Rundown.
Anomalisa, Terminator Salvation.
Anomalisa. I don't even like Anomalisa.
Charlie Bartlett, Star Trek Generations.
Jesus. Flip a coin. I have no idea.
I didn't hate Charlie Bartlett, and that won the flip. I mean, I understand why you would. It's not good. We Were Soldiers, The Black Hole.
What's The Black Hole?
From 1979. I do not know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I said it. Dragonheart, We Were Soldiers.
We Were Soldiers. I have a bad association with that movie because I got stood up on a date going to that movie.
Yeah, that movie has a lot going against it with you. It stars Mel Gibson, and you got a bad story to go with it. Quiz Show, Secret Window.
Oh man, those are two really good movies. Let's see. Quiz Show.
I've never actually seen that one. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, Wild Hogs.
Hunger Games by a lot.
Young Guns, The Matrix.
Matrix.
I won't even pretend. Zero Dark 30, Dave.
Zero Dark 30.
Agreed. Even though Dave is a little bit of fun, though. 84 Charing Cross Road. You know what that is?
I've not seen it. I know what it is, but I've not seen it.
The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2.
Harry Potter.
Star Wars, The Last Jedi, Rocky 3.
I'll go Last Jedi. I like Last Jedi.
I won't fight you on it. Just to be
You won't? It's Rocky.
I know, but that's my favorite Star Wars movie. Rocky
Okay.
1's the only good movie. And then the Creed movies. The rest are just fun. I appreciate what Ryan Johnson did in the middle finger he gave the entire fan base. Stallone just gave us comfort food. He basically made The Force Awakens a bunch of times. The Royal Tenenbaums, Little Nicky.
Royal Tenenbaums.
The Machinist, Rosemary's Baby.
Ooh, which way to go on that? Man. Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, it's a little more classic for me.
Mm-hmm.
Hot Shots Part 2, Rudy.
Hot Shots.
Agreed. Fuck Rudy.